The lost Nazi convoy. The forest was ancient, older than the roads carved through it, older than the borders armies fought to protect, older than the metal thunder that now approached its gates. Its towering pines and deep shadows had seen empires rise and fall, but on one particular day in 1941, it witnessed something it could not explain, an event that would echo across whispers, military reports, and decades of unanswered questions. An entire German convoy rolled toward that forest. 60 vehicles. Fuel trucks, armored carriers, motorcycles, and transport wagons, all rumbling in a long metal chain. They entered the trees at noon, and not a single one of them was ever seen again. No wreckage. No smoke. No bodies. No footprints. Just silence. A silence too perfect to belong to the natural world. Days later, scouts sent to find the convoy returned pale, shaken, and confused. Their report, brief, contradictory, yet undeniably sincere, became one of the strangest documents of the early Eastern Front. But to understand how such a disappearance could even be whispered as possible, we must return to the beginning, the road leading into the heart of that forest, on a day when the sun rose warm and bright, and nothing yet hinted at how wrong things would become. June 22, 1941. Operation Barbarossa had begun. 3 million soldiers surged toward the Soviet border like a tidal wave of steel. Panzer divisions cut through fields and villages with terrifying speed. Supply lines stretched longer by the hour, moving mountains of fuel, ammunition, and rations to the hungry front. Among them was the 211th Armored Transport Group, commanded by Major Erich Weber, a reserved, disciplined man in his late 30s. He was not cruel or boastful. He was simply a believer in order, timing, and routine. War, in his mind, was not chaos but management. His convoy's mission was simple: deliver supplies to an advancing panzer division near a heavily wooded region south of Bialovets Ridge. Nothing unusual. Nothing dangerous. Nothing unpredictable. At least, that's what they thought. Weber stood at the front of the column that morning, adjusting his gloves as damp summer air pressed across the road. His adjutant, Lieutenant Falk, approached with a folded map and eager steps, the kind of enthusiasm found only in soldiers who hadn't been at the front long enough to lose it. "Today should be straightforward," Falk said, unable to hide a faint smile. Weber gave a dry nod. "War rarely grants us easy days. But we'll take this one." The engines roared to life, rolling into alignment behind Weber's half-track. Dozens of men sat silently in the backs of trucks, helmets tilted, eyes heavy with the fatigue of long travel. 4 hours, the convoy moved steadily across rolling hills and sunlit fields. The road was firm. The weather calm. The radio reports routine. But as noon approached, the landscape began to change. The trees grew taller. The road narrowed. The air cooled. The convoy was nearing the edge of the forest. And from the moment the first shadows stretched across the road, a strange stillness took hold. Not a bird. Not an insect. Not even wind moving through branches. It was as if the forest had exhaled once, and then refused to breathe again. Weber noticed instantly. So did Falk, though he tried to mask it. "Sir, the forest seems unusually quiet," he said. Weber didn't look away from the darkening path. Forests can be like that. But deep down, he knew this silence wasn't normal. Not this heavy. Not this absolute. Still, procedure was procedure. Before entering the wooded corridor, Weber radioed headquarters. "Convoy 211 entering Sector Foxtrot. ETA 4 hours. The message went through cleanly. HQ acknowledged. Then the convoy rolled forward into the trees. And the forest swallowed them whole. Inside the woods, daylight thinned into a muted green haze. Branches arched overhead, forming a natural tunnel that filtered even the strongest sunlight. The deeper they went, the cooler the air became. The smell of pine mixed with something damp and ancient lingering in the soil. The convoy slowed naturally, the drivers instinctively cautious. Weber leaned out of his half-track, watching shadows ripple over the vehicles behind him. Engines growled, echoing strangely between the tall trunks. The road should have extended straight through the woods. Maps confirmed it. Scouts reported it. Locals knew it. And yet, something felt wrong. Subtle at first. Easy to dismiss. But undeniable. The road seemed to narrow, not dramatically, but in a way the men felt more than saw. Trees stood closer together than they should have, their roots bulging from the earth like veins. Falk checked his map repeatedly, tracing the inked path with a trembling finger. "This is correct, sir," he insisted, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Weber didn't argue. He simply stared forward, repeating to himself that the forest was playing tricks on their perception. Dense woods often disoriented men who weren't used to them. But then they reached the birch tree. A single white trunk leaned over the road, its thin branches reaching across the convoy's path like skeletal arms. It was not large, not particularly threatening, but something about it struck Weber as wrong. It looked freshly placed, as if it had grown overnight, as if the forest itself had bent it into that position. Weber brushed off the thought, blaming fatigue, but when a single leaf drifted down and landed on his lap, he felt a chill. The leaf was icy cold. Too cold for summer. Too cold for the air around them. He let it fall to the floor of the vehicle. The convoy continued. For another hour, the forest pressed tighter. The road twisted more sharply than any map suggested. The ground grew softer. The light dimmed even though the sun outside should have remained strong. Then the first vehicle stopped abruptly. A metallic clank echoed down the line. Engines idled in confusion. Men jumped down from their seats. Weber moved forward quickly. "What happened?" he demanded. The lead driver stepped aside, face pale. "Sir, the road. It's gone." Weber pushed through the cluster of soldiers until he stood at the very front, and felt a cold shock run through him. Where the road should have continued eastward in a straight line, was now nothing but dense forest. No clearing. No tire grooves. No flattened earth. Just thick undergrowth, young saplings, and tangled roots. As if the road had never existed. Falk stammered behind him. "That's not possible. We drove through here just." But his words died. Because it was possible. It was right in front of them. The road was gone. Weber ordered men to spread out and search for any sign of the path. They moved cautiously between trees, boots sinking into untouched pine needles and soft moss. When they returned, their expressions were identical. Confusion. Fear. Disbelief. "There's no road," one soldier said. "Not even traces of one," another added. "It looks new," whispered a third. As if the forest grew back. The idea was absurd. Impossible. And yet, Weber could not deny what his own eyes showed him. The path behind them was now darker. Narrower. Less certain. Something was wrong. Not militarily. Not strategically. But fundamentally. Still, he refused to show fear. "We camp here," he ordered. "At dawn we find our way out." But the forest had other plans. Night fell like a curtain dropped by unseen hands. One moment there was dim green light filtering through the canopy. And the next, total darkness. Not natural night. Not gradual. Sudden. The men lit no fires, too risky. They sat in cold clusters, listening to the absence of sound. The forest was alive, yet silent. Breathing, yet breathless. Watching, yet invisible. Some soldiers whispered to each other, trading fragments of stories they remembered from childhood, tales of forests that moved, roads that misled, and trees that listened. Others said nothing, clenching their rifles though there was nothing to point at. Weber sat alone, studying the map, tracing the same lines over and over even though he knew the map might as well have been blank. Hours passed. At midnight, every sound stopped. Not reduced, stopped. No wind. No creaking branches. No shifting soil. A silence so complete it felt physical. Falk approached him quietly. "Sir, it feels like the forest is holding something in." Weber didn't answer. Because he felt it too. Just before dawn, a faint tremor passed beneath the earth, soft, subtle, almost like the ground itself inhaling. And when first light filtered hesitantly between branches, Weber gave the order. We move. Engines came alive reluctantly, their sound swallowed by the trees. The convoy advanced slowly, 10 meters, 20, 30, before the ground vibrated again, more clearly this time. A shiver went through the trees. Birds burst from branches overhead in a frantic frenzy. A gust of cold air swept down the road. The men froze. And in that suspended moment, when every instinct in every soldier screamed that something was wrong, the forest exhaled. A strange, hollow sound rolled through the trunks. Light flared between branches, blinding, white, unnatural. The engines sputtered. Men shielded their eyes. The air pulsed once. And then, silence. Silence deeper than before. Silence that suffocated. Silence that erased. The convoy did not scream, did not scatter, did not fire a single shot. They simply disappeared. The lost Nazi convoy. Dawn struggled to enter the forest. Weak rays of light filtered through the towering canopy, falling in thin silver streaks that touched only fragments of the abandoned campsite. The morning air was cold, unnaturally cold for late June. The kind of cold that did not belong in this season, this land, this world. But the forest seemed to obey only its own rules. A search team from German headquarters arrived just after sunrise, 2 motorcycle scouts and a communications officer who looked too young to be in uniform. Their engines growled nervously as they entered the beginning of the wooded path. The road behind them was still intact, still recognizable, still just a road. At least for now. They advanced slowly, scanning the dirt for tracks, wheel marks, anything. There should have been hundreds of impressions. Dozens of grooves. Deep scars in the earth created by 60 heavy vehicles. But the road looked untouched. As if it had slept undisturbed for 100 years. The lead scout shut off his engine, removed his goggles, and stared long at the ground. "This isn't possible," he whispered. But the forest did not care about what was possible. Branches swayed gently overhead. A fog rolled between the trunks like drifting ghosts. The scouts continued deeper. Meters. Then kilometers. The air grew colder still. They reached the place where the convoy had camped. Their boots pressed onto soil that should have been broken, compacted, scarred by vehicle weight and human movement. But the dirt was soft, undisturbed. As if no man had ever walked upon it. The communications officer knelt and sifted the earth through trembling fingers. "It's fresh," he murmured. "Like newly turned soil." The older scout swallowed hard. They were here. I know they were here. They had to be. But the forest offered no explanation. No sign of tents. No tire marks. No footprints. No trash. No fuel smell. The scouts marked the spot on their map anyway, more out of desperation than logic. A breeze passed suddenly, cold enough to sting their faces. The trees groaned. Fog thickened around them. And for the first time, they felt something none of them would dare say aloud. They were not alone. Back at German HQ, reports began to clash. Some officers believed the convoy had been ambushed by Soviet partisans. Others suspected mechanical failure. Others insisted they had simply taken a wrong turn. But the commander in charge of logistics was not convinced. 60 vehicles do not vanish, he stated to his staff. There is always evidence. So he sent a larger search unit, 20 men, armed, alert, and ordered to find any trace of the missing convoy. They marched cautiously into the forest with compasses, maps, and dogs specially trained to track fuel spills, oil, and human presence. The dogs refused to enter the woods. They whined, pulled back, snapped at their handlers. One of them howled so loudly its echo seemed to bounce unnaturally between the trunks. The search captain made the decision to continue without them. They walked in tight formation. The deeper they went, the more wrong the forest felt. It was too cold, too still, too symmetrical, as if the trees had rearranged themselves into an order no human hand created. After an hour, the path split into two. According to all maps, it should not have split at all. Both trails were equally narrow, equally dark, equally deceptive. A corporal muttered, "This wasn't here yesterday." The captain forced confidence into his voice. "It must have been missed. Left path. Stay close." They moved forward. The ground beneath them felt uneven, soft in places, strangely firm in others. Twice, soldiers stumbled as if stepping into shallow pits that vanished the moment they looked back. Branches hung lower. Light dimmed again. Fog clung to their uniforms like cold fingers. One soldier stopped abruptly. "Captain, listen." They listened. Silence. Not silence like a quiet morning. Silence like the world had muted itself. Silence that pushed against their ears. A silence so deep it felt alive. Then, a faint echo. Soft. Almost like footsteps. But far away. And out of rhythm with their own. No one spoke. No one wanted to ask the question now forming in every mind. Are we being followed? The captain raised a clenched fist, signaling halt. He scanned the forest. The fog took strange shapes between trunks. Tall shapes. Shifting shapes. Watching shapes. But when he blinked, they scattered like smoke. His voice cracked slightly as he ordered, "Move." They obeyed. But the trail they followed narrowed so much that branches brushed their shoulders. Roots coiled across their boots like sleeping serpents. A tremor passed underfoot. Soft. Barely noticeable. Then the fog thinned enough to reveal something ahead. A clearing. The soldiers hurried forward, relieved to step out from between the oppressive trees. The clearing was circular, perfectly circular, too perfect for nature. And in the center stood something none of them could explain. A single tire. Just a tire. Old. Weather-worn. Cracked. But German. From their own vehicles. It was the first clue they had found. The men approached cautiously, spreading out. One of them knelt to examine it. "It's from one of our fuel trucks," he said. "Look at the tread, exact match." The captain's hope flickered. If the tire is here, the convoy must be nearby. But the corporal shook his head. "Sir, look at the ground." The soil inside the clearing was untouched. No drag marks. No vehicle grooves. No signs the tire had rolled, bounced, or been carried. It was simply placed. Like a single object in a display. The men exchanged glances. A cold breeze swept through the clearing, bending the grass in a perfect spiral pattern around them. Someone whispered, "We should not be here." The captain opened his mouth to reply. But then one of the soldiers, the youngest barely 20, turned and pointed. His voice broke. "Sir, the trees." They all turned. All around the circular clearing, lining its perfect edge, were markings carved into the trunks. Deep, straight cuts. Symbols. Some lines vertical, others horizontal. Patterns that made no sense. Yet felt deliberate, intentional, communicative. "No partisan makes symbols like these," the captain muttered. The forest groaned. A long, low creaking sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Fog drifted inward from all directions, inching closer like a slow tide. The captain made his decision instantly. "We're leaving. Now." They did not walk. They ran. Branches tore at their sleeves, roots threatened to trip them, but panic fueled their speed. The forest felt alive, moving around them, funneling them, pushing them. They stumbled onto the main path again, gasping for breath. The captain checked his compass. The needle spun wildly. A terrible realization struck them simultaneously. They had no idea where they were. The forest had shifted. The path was different. The trees unfamiliar. The air colder. The men clutched their rifles, not for battle, but for comfort. One whispered, "This place, it doesn't want us to leave." They marched in complete silence. Minutes felt like hours. Every step seemed heavier than the last. Then, a faint glimmer. Light. Not sunlight. Reflected metal. They rushed toward it. And what they saw next made several men stumble backward. A truck. One of the missing convoy's trucks. Perfectly intact. Not rusted. Not damaged. Not abandoned in panic. Just sitting in a small clearing. As if parked neatly for inspection. The captain approached slowly, hand raised. "Check it." A soldier climbed into the cab. He froze. His voice shook as he leaned out. "Sir, the keys are still in the ignition." The captain's breath caught. The truck was empty. No supplies. No footprints. No human presence. And yet the keys remained. As if the driver had simply stepped out for a moment. Something impossible pressed into every mind. Where were the men? They checked the cargo area. Empty. Pristine. Not even dust. Then the corporal called out. "Sir, look at the ground." The area around the truck was wrong. Grass had grown up around the wheels. As if the truck had been sitting there for weeks. But the convoy had disappeared less than 48 hours ago. Something shifted above them. They looked up. A flock of birds burst from the canopy, swirling violently in a panicked spiral. The captain shouted, "Move! Move now!" They sprinted back toward the path. Fog swallowed the clearing behind them. Something cracked in the woods. A branch? A tree trunk? A footstep? None of them waited to find out. They ran until they saw daylight. Real daylight. Warm sunlight. The edge of the forest. They collapsed onto open ground, gasping, coughing, trembling. When they finally returned to headquarters, their report was fragmented, confusing, and terrifying. HQ dismissed half of it. But they could not dismiss the facts. The convoy was gone. The forest held no clues. And the only recovered vehicle had been impossibly aged. After that day, no German unit willingly entered that section of forest again. And the disappearance became an unspoken rule. A place to avoid. A wound in the earth. A question no one could answer. Years later, when the war ended, veterans occasionally spoke in quiet tones about the forest near Bialovet's Ridge. Some called it cursed. Some called it alive. Some believed it was merely nature reclaiming land in ways men failed to understand. But all agreed on one thing. Whatever devoured the convoy left nothing behind. No tracks. No struggle. No remains. Just silence. A silence older than war. Older than men. Older than the fear they carried home. And that silence still rests in that forest today. Waiting. Listening. Remembering the day an entire convoy entered its shadows. And simply never returned.